Welcome to the Diplowoman podcast, where we will be talking with and about incredible women mediators, facilitators, negotiators, ambassadors, peacemakers, peace builders, and more. I am Karma Ekmekci, and I will be your host in this journey of mainstreaming the women, peace, and security agenda into our lifestyles. With a focus on the Arab region, the Diplowoman podcast comes to you in collaboration with the Issam Fares Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs at the American University of Beirut, and is made possible by the generous support of UN Women. The Arabic subtitled video edition is available on the Diplowoman podcast YouTube channel. We're thinking out loud with Her Excellency Zineb Touimi-Benjelloun in this sixth episode of the Diplowoman podcast. Zineb is a UN career diplomat. She was a previous UN resident coordinator in Albania and in Kuwait. She was also the regional director for North Africa for the United Nations Fund for Women. She is currently a consultant on gender equality, sustainable development, and women's rights. Zineb, thank you for being with us today as a guest on the Diplowoman podcast.
Thank you, Karma, and thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to join you today and have this conversation with you.
Thank you. We're very excited to learn a lot from you. To start with, tell us a little bit about your journey. You are a woman from the Arab world who had a whole career at the UN. I often get so many questions from young women who are inspired by the UN and want to have a career and ask me, how can we get our foot in the door? So tell us, how did you start and what can we tell them?
Well, Karma, that's going a long way back, and hopefully I'll be able to remember how it all happened. So even as a young child, and I grew up in Morocco, in Rabat, in fact, and I did my primary and my secondary education in Rabat. And even as a young girl, I was always interested in gender equality issues, wondering why there was such injustice, because I couldn't do certain things because I was a girl. However, I did go to school. And I was encouraged to go to school. I had a father who believed I should go to school, and that I should pursue a higher education and a career. So I had a very supportive environment to the point where I was allowed to go to school in the United States. And at that time, we're talking about 1976, and there were very few Moroccans, let alone Moroccan women, who went to college in the United States. Most Moroccans had the habit of going to college in France or somewhere in Europe.
Of course, a francophone country.
It's a francophone country. Yeah. So I was going a long way, and I went to college. I did my bachelor's in sociology, and I remember my thesis on gender equality. Actually, my thesis was on, I was very thoughtful about, the differences between, the issue of feminism and its various and differing manifestations in different cultural contexts. Mm-hmm. I was trying to put together to combine and to come at peace with my American education, if you like, and my Arab background. And so my thesis was about feminism, Moroccan style.
And it was quite advanced for that time to be speaking about something like this, no? It was avant-gardist in a sense for you to write something.
In a way. It was very interesting. Actually, very recently, I found I was doing some rearranging around the house, and I came across my thesis, and I sort of started leafing through, and I realized that many of the issues are still issues. It was a socio-anthropological study of various different Moroccan women from various walks of life: urban, rural, poor, rich, educated, non-educated, and in terms of their life stories and their battles, their issues, their concerns. So that helped me sort of pull together sort of an idea of what feminism means in a Moroccan context. So
and was this thesis sort of like a stepping stone to get you to your first job, let's say?
Oh, definitely. I mean, after this, I did my graduate work in international affairs, international development, and that was my stepping stone to the UN. I had done my bachelor's at Harvard and went to Columbia for my master's. And
we have that connection.
And we have that connection. There you go.
Hi, our SIPA friends. This is like a shout out to all of our SIPA friends.
That's right. And I don't know if you during your time, but during my time, part of the credits that we had to get was practical experience. So we had to do an internship somewhere.
Sure. We did that too, of course.
You did that too.
Yeah,
that continued. That was that was the stepping stone into my job, because I did my internship with INSTRA at its interim headquarters in New York.
Amazing.
And INSTRA is the UN International Research and Training Institute for the Advancement of Women, which had just been established at that time and was meant to move to the Dominican Republic, but was when I was at Columbia, it was functioning on an interim basis in New York City before the move. So that's where I did my internship. And that was my second year of my master's. And then after I finished my master's, I was recruited as a consultant, and the rest is history. That's how I felt.
And the rest is history, but we want to talk a bit more about that history. So you got your first job, you landed your first job, you call your parents, you say, I'm not coming back to Morocco, guys. How did they take that? How did they take that? Tell us.
No, actually, they were surprisingly supportive. I don't know why I was surprised, but they were very supportive. And so I worked for about a year with INSTRA in New York, and then moved with them to the Dominican Republic. So I participated in the establishment of this institute, in this UN institute in the Dominican Republic. And in fact, INSTRA is one of the 4 UN organizations which were merged in 2010 to constitute UN Women.
So there was UNIFEM, like we said, you were the regional director for North Africa.
Yes, there was UNIFEM, INSTRA, OSAGI, the Office of a Special Advisor to the Secretary General on Gender Equality, and UNIFEM, OSAGI, INSTRA, and DAO, the Division for the Advancement of Women, which was
they all merged in 2010 to create the UN agency, a new UN agency that's now known as UN Women, and support the Diplomat podcast. So thank you, a shout out to them as well. Although this is sometimes a cliche a subject that we talk about, especially with women. I mean, men don't get these questions. But how was your work-life balance going on at this stage? I'm assuming you're in your early 30s, late 20s.
I was in my late 20s. Well, I mean, it was very interesting. I mean, it was very exciting, being in the Dominican Republic, being part of this team that was establishing this institute on the issue of gender equality, which was very dear to my heart. I was working with some very special people, very, motivated. I mean, it was an incredible experience. And but then a year and a half into my stay in the Dominican Republic, I woke up one morning and I said to myself, "Listen, Zineb, you were supposed to return to Morocco after your graduate work." That was the deal that you had, because at that time, I don't know how much, well, the manifestation is different now for this generation, but our generation was very nationalistic. We were going to participate in the development of our countries, and we were going to return. And at that time, most Moroccans returned to Morocco, actually. Very few Moroccans stayed abroad. Now it's different. But at the time, most people returned. So I just decided on the bat, no, I had to do it. If I stayed any longer, I would never return. I returned to Morocco, and actually I was extremely lucky. When I got there, there was a vacancy for a program officer post at UNFPA at the Morocco office.
Okay.
So I applied and I got it. And which was very nice. So I was able to have my UN.
Right.
And all
You had your blue hat on.
Yeah. So that's how I started with UNFPA, where I call UNFPA sort of my formative years. As a young program officer. That's where I really learned programming, where that's where, you know, it was very, very formative. And that's when I got married and had my 2 children.
Your 2 daughters?
So my 2 daughters, yes, yes. I have 2 daughters. Now they're adults, but and then after that, I moved to UNIFEM, which is the United Nations Fund for the UNIFEM did not exist in Morocco at the time, but they had decided to open a gender advisor's office for Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia based in Morocco. So it was like, okay, this might be interesting. I mean, first of all, it'll be a pure focus on gender equality issues, which was, of course, my passion.
Which we're going to talk a little bit more about later, because I want to see, you know, when you fast forward 20 years, where do we stand on some of the issues you worked on 20 years ago? I'm curious to learn
Definitely.
about that.
So that was interesting, because that was a stepping stone back to my international career, because I reverted back to an international civil servant, because I was covering 3 countries, and
exactly.
And that gender advisor office actually developed from a gender advisor office to 3 countries to a program coordinator office. Why? Simply because there was so much demand at that time for UNIFEM support that we couldn't just be advisory. There was demand for programmatic work, for support to
field work, basically. You had to be on the ground.
Had to be on the ground. At that time, in these countries, women's issues were taking on some important, you know, some
attention, grabbing more attention.
Lots of attention. And it was an area of reform. There was a lot, the women's movement was becoming stronger and stronger. So we were getting a lot of support from the women's, getting a lot of requests from the women's movement for support for the reform, for their advocacy work, for the reform of laws. And in fact, in Morocco, for example, we supported the whole process of advocacy for the reform of the family law, which is in an Arab Muslim context, as you know, is critical for women's status. I mean, it all starts there. And if you don't fix that, nothing can be fixed.
Right, of course, you know that. Family law, personal status law.
Yeah, you know what that is.
Cornerstone of a society.
But we worked on the nationality law, on the penal code. I mean, things like that.
But let me ask you this. You know, these are the most basic issues that women face in mainly Arab countries. Were those issues that you worked on and succeeded in advancing, like the nationality law or the family law, did they lead later on into more women in representation, in high-level decision-making positions, in ministerial posts, in parliament, in ambassadorial level? Do you feel like these allowed, this was the foundation for these women to be able to advance in those positions?
No, I think that they do help. It liberates.
It liberates. That's the operative word, liberate. It liberates.
It liberates, because if you have issues such as, you know, for example, in the old personal status law, if we take Morocco as an example, where a woman needed to obey her husband, that has been removed. And that is very meaningful. Symbolically, not even only symbolically, but in real life. I mean, if you owe obedience to somebody, that means you're a subject. A woman goes from the guardianship of her father to the guardianship of her husband. She's never an adult.
Yeah, no agency. You're not giving her.
No agency.
Right.
Yeah. So when that is removed, that's liberating. That means that she can make decisions, her own decisions, that she can move forward. another thing that was changed. Women's access to divorce was facilitated. Okay? Before, for a woman to get a divorce, if the husband doesn't want to give her a divorce, it could go on forever, basically. And it really had to be, real violent incidents that had to be proven over and over again. It was really, really difficult. And one of the reforms that were introduced by the family law was women's access to divorce was facilitated. A form of divorce was introduced, shiqaq, okay, where a woman could ask for a divorce and not have to give a reason. Just say, we just don't get along together.
So, you worked on these issues, and as you said, they were entry points to liberate women. But I look at the Arab world, and there's so much discrepancy between the countries in the Arab world, right? So Morocco may be very advanced in these issues, others may still be lagging behind. So I don't know if we can look at the women in the Arab world, all of us at the same, from the same lens of challenges that they are facing. But do you see what unifies us? What does really unify us? What is the challenge that is currently unifying us as Arab women in the region that we can work on collectively?
Well, it remains our legal status. That is clear. Because even with the reforms that took place, not only in Morocco, in Algeria, and Tunisia, and in other countries in the Middle East, whatever. Egypt, Jordan, I know that reform did, but it was not total reform.
Right. It's so still very much rooted in the patriarchy, in the patriarchal norms and patriarchal society.
And that unites us because our personal status codes emerge from the same principles, from the same sort of source. And we have to, in order to change them, there are many sensitivities, there's a lot of, there are many different stakeholders who need to be consulted, who need to be convinced. Right. Mindsets have been formed around these inequalities, if you like. And so this is a common battle. And in fact, one of the very exciting initiatives which we supported when I was the head of UNIFEM for North Africa is an initiative called Égalité sans réserve, equality without reservations. It was sort of a network of Maghreb and Mashrek NGOs who came together to advocate jointly for the lifting of reservations to CEDAW, which meant that laws at the national level had to be reformed first before the countries could lift the reservations to CEDAW. So why did these women come together? Because they saw a common challenge, because they saw that we had a common challenge to face and that we needed, by working together, by advocating together, they could, achieve a greater, purpose or greater results, basically. They could learn from each other, share the experiences, see what works, what doesn't work. So that was actually very, very exciting.
I want to tell our listeners, is there like a secret formula that is, what is it? Is it a combination of luck and education? Is it education and networking? What is it that gets you in, and keeps you there? Because really a lot of our listeners often ask us these sort of questions, and we want to hear it from you.
No, well, how do you get into the UN? Everybody has their experiences. I recounted my experience, basically,
But what advice would you give? What's something they should focus on more than something else?
Yeah, well, I think what people or young women or young men for that matter, with their interest in the UN, if they're interested in working with the UN, is one of the things to try to volunteer with their field offices at the country level. Now I'm talking about the Arab world. So,
Yes, we want to focus on the Arab world.
In every Arab country, there is a UN office. There are UN agencies, depending on their interests. They can approach these agencies, see if there are any internships, available, volunteer to do work, get involved, basically. Working with NGOs, depending on your field of interest.
Of course.
Working with NGOs gives you very important experience and very valuable experience for the UN. Developing your networks, people who know you, who know your work, that's very, very important. So I think those are three things that are, to me are very, are essential and helpful. And I look at it as myself, how I got in, but also the kind of people that I recruited as a manager throughout my career. So it's usually, in my field, it's often people who've worked with NGOs on the issue, who've been very active, who I've seen their work outside of the UN. So, that was an added value, who have volunteered, who came in as interns and proved themselves to be, really, really valuable, and who are able to connect and network with different people and with, and different, departments, and able to, show their value and demonstrate their worth, basically.
That's very useful advice. So you moved around quite a bit, though, after you got married and had these two lovely girls. You had to move again because of your career, right? And again, I don't want this to sound like a cliche question, but it's a reality. Many of us think twice before we apply to a certain job, go to a certain job, because we feel like maybe we can't pick up our families, and our partners may not want to move, and all that. And I think here we need to also address a little bit the men listening to us, and give them a couple of our own 2 cents of how they can be helpful in advancing our careers. What was your experience in this?
Well, my experience, very interesting. So I started as an international, working in New York and in the Dominican Republic, but then I was single, so it was not an issue. Then I decided to return to Morocco, and I did get married and had children. And the agreement with my husband, who was very supportive, I have no complaints on that level. On the contrary, he was very supportive, and I have to admit that even the marriage took place because of a certain mentality. We understood each other on certain levels. So he was very supportive and very proud, but we were realistic, basically. It was like a discussion. Okay, yes, after a certain point, you're going to be asked to rotate. That's the name of the game.
That's the deal. That's the deal.
Yeah, that's the deal. However, he has a job and he has a career as well.
Right.
Okay. So how do we balance these two? My career, his career. His career is in Morocco. Okay. My career, if it's
everywhere,
going to develop, is going to have to go beyond. So the issue was this. Okay, fine. Let's wait until, try to stay put until the girls get their baccalaureate or high school diploma, and then they go off to college, and then then you can go wherever you want, and I will join you. He would take early retirement and join me, basically. So that's how it was. And I was very lucky, because after UNFPA, then the UNIFEM regional post opened and the regional office. So that gave me an international opening, but at the same time, I was based at home. So, I did not disrupt the family. Yes, I was traveling a lot. I was absent a lot of the time, for sure, but at least they were stable. And, my husband was able to pursue his career. Now, after that, then the girls, the girls had their baccalaureate. They're 3 years apart, and it was like, okay, now it's time to start thinking about moving. I was proposed by UNIFEM to pass the RC assessment, which is an exam or sort of an assessment that all potential resident coordinators have to take to see if they are suitable to become resident coordinators. So I passed the assessment. I took the assessment and I passed. And so now I needed to be posted. And I was chosen for, I applied for Albania and I was selected. And then it was like, okay, my husband, well, the agreement years ago was that you were going to take an early retirement and come with me. And it was like, he was 55 and he was like, I really don't want to stop my career now. And I have to say, I understood that. I mean, and it's not so easy for it to, in other countries, to go to a country and find a job.
Of course. For
the spouse of a diplomat. Sometimes it's not even, proper, especially as I'm the head of the UN in a country. I can't promote my husband to get a job. I mean, that's not done and that's not correct. So it was like, okay. Then we said, at this point, we'll have, he'd stay in Morocco. I went to Albania. And of course, we tried to see each other as much as possible every 6 weeks. It was not too far. So, we managed it that way. Every 6 weeks, either, he came to Albania or, I came.
So you made it work. That's
we
it.
Made it work.
It's the commitment of making it work.
Yeah, basically you make it, I mean, if you believe in it and if you are committed, you just, make it work, as you say.
So, I mean, I'm sure you found yourself at some points in situations where you were faced with incidents. And you thought to yourself, wait a minute, this is happening to me because I'm a woman. This probably wouldn't happen to me if I were a man. Tell us an anecdote, something that happened to you in the workplace that you felt like this is happening to me because of gender.
Well, there are some funny incidents actually at the very beginning of my career, and not with the UN. Actually, when I returned from the Dominican Republic to Morocco, before I got the job at UNFPA, I was applying to other jobs because I was not certain that I would get the UNFPA job. I had applied to this private sector multinational. It was actually I think I could say that. It was a multinational. And here I come with my Harvard and Columbia diploma, 2 or 3 years of experience at the international level. And they were very happy to receive me, but what they had to offer was a secretarial job. And I just said, okay, well, is that all you have to offer? Yes. I said, well, thank you. Thank you very much for receiving me, but I cannot take that. And the guy actually said, well, you're not going to find anything better.
Wow. Maybe find his email and shoot him an email and tell him what happened after that.
And that was shocking. I mean, even at that time, it was shocking, I mean, that would, and this was a multinational, but okay. And then there was this international organization, I mean, non-UN, it was, I had applied there and I had done my homework. I mean, the work was interesting. I had looked at their recruitment procedures, their salary scales, things like that. So, I knew more or less, what to expect if I got an offer. And so I went through a series of interviews. It was done very well. I went through a series of interviews and got to the big boss. And I was sitting with the big boss and, he was very happy to receive me. He said, you have a very good profile, good experience, whatever. We offer you this post and with this salary. And I'm like, well, because it was 50% of what I expected.
Of course.
Or of what I knew people of the same grade were getting, men for that, young men at that. It was half. And he saw the shock in my face. He goes, well, what do you expect? I mean, did you expect to receive the same salary you got at the UN, you know, as an international? I said, certainly not. You know, I was not expecting that, but I was, you know, expecting at least,
Parity
you know,
with
no,
my male peers.
I didn't tell him that. At least this amount, which was what I knew they were giving to young men or young professional men.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, well, if that's your minimum, what's your maximum? And I said, well, it's up to you, sir. So he was, I guess he thought I was obnoxious, but you know,
and this is you know, this is an issue that we face every day as women, especially in the region.
And still,
it is very much. I mean, you talk to friends, you go to coffee, you talk to your male peers, and you suddenly find out that somehow, you know, with the same level of expertise or even more, you get paid less. And I think we need to start talking about this. You know, we should crush this taboo that, you know, of course, men are going to be paid more because they're the breadwinner. I don't think, you know, this is an argument that flies at all. It never did, but I don't think we should, you know, let it or allow it to fly anymore. And it's, I think I'm seeing more and more women being able to speak about this, and I'm very, you know, glad that you raised this issue because it's such a pressing issue. And girls always feel, or women feel like, you know, we shouldn't talk about money, right? There's always this
it's difficult. Yeah, of course.
It's difficult. Like, how do I bring up the subject? How do I say this is not my market value? I deserve much more. But I think we need to, you know, mentor more and more young women to be able to have the courage to speak up about this issue. So thank you for bringing it up.
Definitely, thank you.
Zineb, you are a member of the Mediterranean Women's Mediators Network, and actually that's where we met, and that's where I was inspired by you, in a sense, and this is how, you know, I felt this cosmic connection that brought us together. But you are in this network because you believe in peace building, in mediation, in conflict resolution, and we come together as women from the region with similar challenges. With the challenge that we are not very present in peace talks and peace processes and conflict resolution in a neighborhood that really, you know, is failing miserably in bringing peace to its people. So what's your take? I mean, we know what the literature says. We know what, you know, we know what's proven and what's not, but in your own words, you know, how do you see the value that a network, these kinds of networks bring? And what do you think we should be doing together to push more women from a younger age to be engaged in dialogue and peace building?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's simple and it's complicated. It's very simple because I know we have so many talented women in this region. I mean, I've worked with the women's movement in this region throughout most of my career. I know how competent they are. I know what they've done and what they are capable of doing. So it's not a question of competency. It's there. We just need to open the doors. And, you know, as in the issue, we've done it elsewhere. For example, in the area of women's political participation. You know, we were always told, but women don't want to present themselves to, you know, political office. They don't get involved. They don't. As soon as quotas were applied, the doors were flooded. And I've seen that happen over and over again. So I really think we have no choice but to establish, you know, quotas in this area as well. I mean, women need to be at the peace table. they have so much, not just because they're women. I mean, that's not the issue, but what they have to bring, the knowledge, the competencies, the expertise that they have.
And the emotional intelligence, maybe a little bit of emotional intelligence that we lack.
Lots of emotional intelligence. I mean, they just need to be there. I mean, the world needs its women.
The world needs to be inclusive.
Yes, definitely. And I think I mean, if we can advocate for that, for the establishment of quotas at various levels of the peace building process, and if we can, protection, we need to protect our women peace builders. I mean, that's essential, and we've seen it happen, over and over again. So, I mean, these are sort of like steps that need to be, they're not simple, of course, because there, consensus has to come around these issues. But I think it's essential because it's not going to happen automatically, and it's not going to happen, simply because it's been just very slow. When you look at the, statistics on women's participation in official peace building and negotiations for peace, they're very few.
Absolutely. A last message that you want to leave for our listeners? Advice, a thought, a quote, something that you want to share with us?
Well, I would like to tell the young women and men who may be listening to us that, we've come a long ways. I mean, if I look at my generation, if we've spoken about the story of my life in this podcast, okay? So
in a very short period of time. So we're not doing you justice, but we're doing our best.
No, you've done quite well, Karma. So a lot has been accomplished. We've come a long ways, but there is still a lot to do. We haven't advanced. I mean, when I look back 30 years back, 40 years back, what my ambitions, I thought, by 20 years, when I was 20, I thought that gender equality was going to be resolved 10 or 20 years later, max. Well, no, it's not. Some major gains have been made. I mean, in the education area, if we look at the Arab world, in the education area, in the health area, but employment is a disaster. The employment is a catastrophe. The legal status leaves, there's still a lot to be done there. And I think that the world right now just needs more of its women and its men to work together. And if men and women do not work together for equality in the home, in the workplace, in public spaces, I think we're going to continue seeing all these conflicts and all these issues arising and all these unnecessary obstacles to people's well-being.
Zineb Touimi-Benjelloun, thank you for being with us on the Diplowoman podcast.
Thank you, Karma, and thank you for the invitation. It was my pleasure.